Kams audio son. You burn this swine when I want you shine. The tree of life, them I want you climb, cause them heart no kind. Kams I say them heart no kind. Buxton Massive, Kidaki, Red Hat.
Never joke, never joke, never joke. Oh, money never, money never, money never, money not know what you can even money. Money never, money never, money you can keep, you can even money. When you been a corrupt in a bill tell me money. Now because your money done, you come with conniving money. When you had your pocket full in a bill tell me money. Now because your money done, you hustle for tell me money. Yes, money never, money never, money never, money not know what you conniving money. Neighbor joker, neighbor joker, neighbor joker. That's all the money that me walk for. A 2 pound note and a guilda piece. A 2 pound note and a guilda piece. A 2 pound note and a guilda piece. This is all the money that me walk for. I said money never, money never, money never, money not know what you can even money.
Well, I invoke the WPA's position that we are engaging in civil disobedience and non-cooperation with the government, and on that grounds I refuse to participate in the interview. The question in struggle, is not personal. Whatever sacrifice as a political activist or a political leader you have to make for your people, you have to make it.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Kadaki Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Kams TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruptions over land and sea, where the wicked politicians, they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody. With 6 races should live in harmony. Is one set of people getting aisle money. Is one set of people doing the thievery. Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. This is a program that you all can see, sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, which has ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, fooling the people. You promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. Stop fooling people. You're promoting evil. stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. I say, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. They got Rickford, Bork and Mark Benchcop. David Hines and Kadaki Amsterdam. Sherrod Duncan, Nigel London. Normal Brown and Gavin Matthews. Big up Paslow Port People Governor. Simona Brooms, Robin Simpson. Hampton Green and Winston Jordan. And yes, we can go right on and on. Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again.
The relatives and friends of young Wyndham Bacchus, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of our in Boston, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of Peter Headley, they deserve justice.
And so when we say that Guyana is an apartheid state, we have the evidence to show.
morning. Morning, are you morning? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is now 7 hours 19 on the 5th day of July in the year 2023. It's the morning after the CARICOM conference, etc. It's the morning after you heard of Nigel Darmlow's resignation. Interesting, huh? Yeah. Very interesting. But how have you been? How you spend it yesterday? How you pass it last night? How you wake up? What you plan doing today? They're called questions. Answer them. How was it yesterday? How many of you went out to the protest line yesterday? Made some money? How much money you made? I hope you made a lot of money. Money makes the world go round. Money makes things happen. My friend says the Jamaicans say every mickle make a muckle. That's to say money is not too little bit. If you know how to manage it, if you know what to do with it, eventually you can make it do magic for you. Always remember, 100 cents make a dollar. How do you start making a dollar? Who wants to answer that question for me? It's not a riddle. If 100 cents make a dollar, how do you make a dollar? Where do you start to make a dollar if 100 cents make a dollar? That's a question I want you to answer. Right? Maybe I'll have some quiz like those. Somebody told me the last time I said something like this. Mr. Amsterdam, the children coming to have a good time. They ain't coming for you, put them through academic work. Maybe I'll have some quiz. As I get to ask my 12-year-olds and younger, if 100 cents make a dollar, where do you start to make a dollar? I see Charlie Williams say investment. Charlie, you're wrong. You see, these simple questions twist us up and turn us up because we think within the box or outside the box. I don't know where y'all thinking. But the question is simple. If 100 cents make a dollar, where do you start to make a dollar? Right? We have to understand building foundations, and that's important. We have to understand building foundations. We cannot get a skyscraper without a foundation. Especially if we build a skyscraper on a weak foundation, it will come tumbling down. So it's important to place a lot of emphasis on the foundation. Correct answer, Randy Moore. If 100 cents make a dollar, you got to start at a cent. And so if you don't know how to treasure that cent, if you don't know how to protect that cent, you ain't get into a dollar. Good? And the maths continues. I got a friend say you got to make the maths. Good? Anyway, it's Wednesday. We'll talk tomorrow about these things. We'll talk tomorrow about more of these things. It's Wednesday. It's Dr. Hines' day. And so we have a lot to talk about. I want to believe, like the whole of Guyana, Dr. Hines feels victorious. Darmlal has resigned. But let him speak for himself. Dr. Hines, welcome to the program. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you, Dubai?
I am doing.
I hope, sometimes when I reflect on how I greet you and ask you how you Dubai, I hope you don't get offended, just by that, because, it's we country people think.
Yeah.
Right? Yesterday, a young lady came to my gate. Well, I couldn't talk like this yesterday because I had a mouth problem. It's partly rectified. I had some serious... I had a dental issue, so I got that sorted. It comes with 50. So a young lady came to my gate yesterday after I returned from the dentist. And she said she's part of some pageant and she has to do her introduction in Creolese. And she is not good at Creolese. So somebody advised her to come by Sir Kiraki and he will help her out. Can you imagine you're a Buxtonian child, you're born in Buxton, you go on the East Coast, you grow up in the village, and you don't know Creolese?
I can imagine it.
Why? Oh, why? What would be the cause of that? For me, that's my first language.
Well, partly it's because we try to get our children not to speak it. Second, we don't teach it in schools. Third, if you don't understand English language too well, you'll have difficulty with Creolese, because the constructions are the same, you know. Me been there, I was there. You know, the same English construction. Because remember, Creolese is really a fusion of English with remnants of African languages. So in a sense, it's a new language, and it has developed its own rules, its own emphasis, and so on. And if you don't teach it, I mean, people will speak it, you know. But when you ask them in a formal way to talk about it, they'll have difficulty. Here is the case to teach Creole or Creolese in schools. In those countries that teach both the Creole and the English, you find people are fluent in both.
You know, I'm happy for that explanation. You know, I reflect as a teacher. It's a joke I always tell. When I was English language teacher at the CSEC level at one of the private schools on the East Coast, predominantly Indian, the students, all you could get them talk is, where are you? Right? And one day challenge, I must say, listen, you are exam students, and you have to do better than this. Because you have to understand that you have to practice using standard English as we see. Because the time you take to, as I would say, translate in the exam room, it's time going. So you have to get to that point. And I had this brilliant student, I think her name was Bibi. And I'm quarreling with them and so on, and Bibi came to me a day, and Bibi says, sir, I understand what you're saying, you know. But anytime we try to use standard English at home, our parents chastise us. Right? Oh, you think you're better than our way? You come with the English. Right? And I'm saying that to say, look at, I would say the difference identified by you. You're saying that we try not to get our children to speak Creolese. But here it is on the opposite side, the people chastising their children for speaking standard English. And like I said, I believe it should be my first language. You grow up in a community where Creolese, in my mind, is dominant. And so what you should be transitioning is from Creolese to English. Not knowing the thing. Right? But the longer you live, the more you learn this. Like, you wanted to say something here? I see your eyes are
No.
like,
You're quite right. I mean, you know, we learn the two languages not together. We learn them separately, and that's where the difficulty is. When you have two languages and you learn them separately, you end up, as they say, being neither fish nor fowl. The two languages have to be learned together because they are constructed together. They're constructed together. One comes from the other, and if once you learn them separately, then you're learning them as strangers rather than learning them together.
Very well. And always remember, brother, you see teaching us English language and giving us these Creole challenges. Translate this to standard English and stuff like that.
Well, when we were growing up, my generation, there were always men and women in the village who would insist that we learn Creolese and learn the construction of Creolese and learn the meaning. Viewers and listeners would have heard me over the years making reference to Teacher George, who taught English, but he was an expert to speak on Creolese. And he would insist that we learn the two languages together, and he insisted that they were languages. He once told me, he said they invited him to go to UG to talk about proverbs and Creole. He said, well, they will invite me at UG to talk about Creole and proverbs. He said, you want school by? I mean, why you know you'll be proud of Teacher George. He said, me go there. And when you see me start for talk, so them I eat out of me hand. This time, me not gone a second gear yet. Me there first gear. If we been go a third gear, me not broke up the whole university. And Teacher George was that kind of chap. And you notice he's teaching you're educated by insisting that you use the language, and you see there how he used the images, me not gone a second gear yet, me there first gear. And I saw them eat out me and he making the point that here are educated people at the university, and he's speaking to them in Creolese, and they are mesmerized, So in a sense, he's making the point that you are making, but he's also insisting to me, not come like them, not come like them.
Very well. No, it's 50 years. CARICOM is 50 years. I should say as a I don't know, a member of the CARICOM generation, because CARICOM gives me a few days in age. I recognized yesterday. I've seen so much. I've seen. I grew up hearing the championing calls of CARICOM, the virtues of CARICOM. I also witnessed in changing times what I consider the failures of CARICOM. We have a single market and common market treaty and all of that, but we have the CARICOM members fighting each other for what we call local content rights and common external tariff exemptions and stuff like that. We have a Caribbean Court of Justice that more than half of the community is not a part of, and so on and so forth. Is CARICOM still relevant at 50?
Oh, yes, most relevant. Most relevant. The Caribbean integration movement has to go back to the plantation. The plantation was a system across the Caribbean. The plantation owners did not see the system as Trinidadian or Barbadian or Guyanese. They saw it as a total system, and I would argue that therein lies the origin of regional integration. And so I am making the argument that regional integration starts with what we have in common, what we share. And in this case, the Black Stallions song, The Caribbean Man, that we come on the same ship from the same place. And so we must push one common intention for the women and the children. And that a man who don't know his history cannot form no integration. And so he's arguing there that identity becomes the basis for integration. And of course, the identity of coming, the identity that comes out of the coming on the ship, whether it was the ship from Africa or the ship from India or the ship from Madeira, we all came on ships. So of course, the indigenous people did not come on ship, but one imagine that some of them came by boat. Some of them have come by land, but I'm sure some of them came by boat. So for me, CARICOM at its heart, it's about our identity, what we share, that so that when you go to Trinidad or you go to St. Kitts or you go to Nevis or St. Vincent, if you're a Guyanese, you feel at home. You see somebody who looks like somebody you know in your village. We speak the same, different emphasis or what they call different accents, but we speak the same, we walk the same, we think the same. And so therefore, integration comes, if you will, naturally to us. Where our difficulty has been is that we have developed as nation states, each of us, each quote-unquote island, and that we have developed a political identity, a civic identity, called Jamaica or Guyana or St. Vincent. And often it is that civic identity that is fighting against the cultural identity, and vice versa. The cultural identity is fighting against the civic identity, or put it another way, there is a tension between the civic identity and the cultural identity. We lasted as one country between 1958 and 1962. What was called the Federation. Guyana was not part of it, and Guyana was not part of it for political reasons that the PPP government argued at the time, that Indians would become a minority if Guyana were to join the Federation. And so they didn't join the Federation for political reasons. Guyana and Martin Carter, Rory Westmas, etc., would then split from the PPP in a second split of the party on the question of federation, because they felt that it was Guyana's place to be in the Federation. The Federation lasted from 58 to 62, and it ended when Jamaica, which was the northernmost country in the Federation at the time, Bahamas was not part of it. And the Jamaican economy at that time was the quote-unquote strongest in the Caribbean. You know, the Jamaican dollar at that time was stronger than the American dollar as a result of bauxite and tourism. Jamaica's economy, from a numerical standpoint, was doing well. And so Jamaica, or the Jamaica Labour Party, felt that its destiny was with the North, with America. And Jamaica was so far away from the rest of us that they didn't know the rest of the Caribbean as much. And, you know, they called the Federation, and the supporters of the Jamaica Labour Party voted to leave the Federation. And Eric Williams, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, then said 1 from 10 leaves nothing, because there were 10 of them, and you know, the strongest one left, and Eric Williams said 1 from 10 left nothing, and that was the breakup of the Federation. But it was not the end of the dream, because we went into what was called the Little Eight. That is the OECS countries, and today the OECS is the epitome of regional integration. They have their own bank, they have their own currency, they have their own court, and they are functioning as one of the best regional integration movement in the world. From the Little Eight, we then moved into CARIFTA in 1965, the Caribbean Free Trade Area. And there were talks about Guyana, Antigua, St. Kitts, I think, becoming one country, and so forth. But we went through CARIFTA, and then out of CARIFTA came CARICOM in 1973. So while we did not get to a political union, we have a kind of functional cooperation. You know, we continue to have that tension between our islandness and our regionalist perspective. And that is to be understood. You know, we have the institution of cricket. We have been playing cricket together, Test cricket since 1928. Ups and downs, we notice Jason Holt making a plea for what he calls the regionalization of our cricket, saying that insularity has stepped in. We have the University of the West Indies, which is a shining example of regional integration. We have a court, although as you mentioned, not all of the member states belong to the Caribbean Court of Justice, but they're all affected by the Caribbean Court of Justice. That is, although Jamaica, for example, is not a member of the CCJ, a Jamaican could bring a case before the CCJ, as happened in the Myrie case, where Miss Myrie from Jamaica was denied entry into Barbados, and she sued, and it went all the way to the CCJ. And Barbados was arguing that Miss Myrie did not have standing because Jamaica was not part of the court, and the court ruled otherwise. The treaty itself says that the CCJ, as an original destination, it's an original destination for all the countries. It's not the final court, but it's their original court. And Miss Myrie won her case. And that case has implications for all the member countries, including Jamaica. So we have made some strides. We do have a single market in the CARICOM is a market where certain goods and certain categories of labor can move freely. We don't yet have a single economy, but we have a single market. So in many regards, we have done well as an integration movement. I mean, the EU, they've been in existence since the 1950s. And we notice Brexit, where England has moved away out of the Union. And they, in the EU, they have what is called the opt-out clause. So take, for example, in Britain, the United Kingdom, always maintained its pound. It was never part of the EU currency. And I think a couple of the Scandinavian countries do not use the EU currency. So regional integration is not an easy thing because you're trying to bring together nation states. They may share a lot culturally, but the pull of the nation state is always there. So I would say that after 50 years, we've survived. One, we've survived as a regional entity. Two, that there is a lot of regionalization at the level of the people. There are many people here this morning watching this program from a lot of the islands in the Caribbean, if not all of them. Guyanese are living in Montserrat and Nevis and Barbuda, and I'm calling the ones that are not the more popular ones. They're living all over. They're living all over. And more now, you are seeing Caribbean people coming into Guyana. This is not new. Guyana used to be the destination for a lot of quote-unquote islanders, as we called them when I was a child. A lot from St. Vincent, a lot from St. Lucia. That Madia, for example, is a St. Lucian place. A lot of St. Lucians came to work in the fields, in the gold fields, and lots of them lived at Madia. You go to a place like Linden, lots of Vincentians, lots of St. Lucians, lots of Grenadians. A lot of the families there come from those quote-unquote islands. And so we have always had people moving between and among the Caribbean. Trinidad At one time, it was difficult to find more than half of the Trinidadian population that was Trinidadian. George Lamin made that point when he, as a Barbadian, went to Trinidad for the first time. It was difficult to find a pure Trinidadian family. There was a Trinidadian mother, a Grenadian father, or a Vincentian father, Trinidadian mother. A lot of movement between Grenada and St. Vincent and Trinidad, St. Vincent and Trinidad. And, you know, as the audience know, I study Calypso. And you'd be amazed at the Calypsonians, all of them. I mean, Sparrow was born in Grenada. You know, Valentino was born in Grenada. The Duke mother is a Vincentian, and we can go on and on and on. And Trinidad is really a Caribbean cosmopolitan place. The number, lots of Guyanese went there too, in Trinidad. And we know, of course, migration between Barbados and Guyana. Ironically, because Bajans, as you know, at some point politically tried to keep Guyanese out. But lots of traffic between Barbados and Guyana. My own Pines family originated in Barbados. I have Barbadian great-grandsons, great-great-grands. So, as a region, as a people, our integration has gone further than our integration as governments. And my generation, for example, is a CARICOM generation. You know, we are Guyanese, but grew up on Bob Marley's music. You know, we learned to accept a Vivian Richards as a West Indian. And, you know, the scholars that we were enamored with, lots of them were non-Guyanese. And so my generation is a CARICOM generation. In my own intellectual development, my own cultural sense of myself is very, very Caribbean, very West Indian. And you can tell, I mean, people listen to me speak, that I don't exclude my Caribbeanness from my own consciousness of self. And I think that goes a lot for my generation.
Thank you. In the age of digitization, we notice there's a digital ID, there's digital this, there's digital that. There are many who argue that these the creation of these digital stuff is for, let me call it singularity, making it easier for travel and commerce and everything. Do you get the impression that CARICOM is closer to that political union that we perhaps were aiming for in the early?
No, I think, ironically, the political union is further and further away. I think we're functional, we're doing well as functional, but the political union is problematic because, my God, I mean, we are 57 years as Guyanese, a Guyanese nation state. Jamaica and Trinidad are 61 years. And so we've developed that islandness when it comes to our politics. And the further we move away from the federation, the more difficult political union is going to be. Meanwhile, the present government in Guyana, for example, I think they are using the status quo of CARICOM, but the PPP is anti-integration. As I said, the PPP didn't take Guyana into the federation. The PPP always saw CARICOM as a black people gang, and they were very angry at the Caribbean leaders for not condemning Burnham during Burnham years. They felt it was a club. that, you know, people like Burnham and Barrow and Eugenia Charles, they all were in England together. And Eugenia Charles told me in an interview I did with her years ago, she said, well, you know, I know when Otto became a communist, you know, the communist man used to come every Sunday at the dorms. And he would spend the longest with Odo. And so I know when he became a communist, because she, Barrow and Burnham were at university in England at the same time. And they knew each other. And, you know, she said, you know, I could tease him. Odo, why are you dressing up like that? How can you represent the masses and wearing your mauve suit, you know? And, you know, she said she would tease him, and she could, because they went to school together, and they had that bond. And the PPP, so Jagan didn't go to school in England. Jagan went to school in America. And so he was not part of that club, if you will. And so the PPP developed a kind of anti-CARICOM reflexes, which is still there. In the 1990s, when Pandey came to power in Trinidad and the PPP was in power in Guyana, and there was an Indian-led government in Suriname, they attempted to form a sub-regional group. They didn't get very far. So I don't think the PPP will join. They will, under their leadership, they will join a political union of the Caribbean. Because politically they will argue that Indians would be a minority. You know, you look at the PPP's attitude to Asians coming here. And I don't think it's a dislike for Asian people, but it's a political move. Haiti is the largest, has the largest population in CARICOM. And if we were to become one Caribbean, then almost half of our population as a Caribbean country would be Haitians. And more than 2/3 would be Africans. And so the PPP wouldn't agree with that. So I'm saying that to say that there are political issues. We know in Jamaica, for example, the Jamaica Labour Party to this day continues to be resistant to CARICOM. I mean, the PNP, the People's National Party, is more pro-CARICOM than the Jamaica Labour Party. And so you have these issues of politics inside of the countries that are militating against a one Caribbean political union.
Thank you. You know, Dr. Hines, catch your breath. Get some water. Let me ask Lynette a question. Lynette, are you getting song now? I see Lynette saying she is getting no song. She's the only person who has complained. So if you have a song problem, please let me know quickly before I ask the next question of Dr. Hines. As Winston Jordan would say, it's a good way to segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. I was hoping to leave that for the last, but that you've mentioned it, in that the PPP was never keen, Jagan was never keen on joining CARICOM because he believed that Indians would be a minority in that grouping. But when Pandey became president, he was keen on forming some kind of union with Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname. I recently came upon a video which I've been discussing on this program with Ravi Dev in 2014 attending a Hindu Congress in Suriname, and basically was promoting the idea of Hindus coming to Guyana and taking over, as I would say, in the various sectors. It was clearly a case of making a case for Hindu domination in Guyana, and the idea of that same quote-unquote tripartite relationship between Guyana, Suriname, and naturally Trinidad, obviously with a different leadership at the time. You must have seen that video. You must have had discussions around it. Help us to understand the PPP position.
It was a conference in India. It was a conference in India.
Oh, it was India, not Suriname.
Yeah, it was delegates there from the Indian diaspora that went to India. And the person who drew my attention to that thing is Eric Phillips. Weeks after Rafidev made the thing, Eric discovered the video and shared it with some of us, and I promptly shared it with Brother Guyana. And to this day, he has expressed an interest in that thing. He kept asking me over the years to send that video back to him because he wanted to address it. I think he wrote something on it, if I'm not mistaken, when we first discovered the video, or Eric shared it with us. So it's an old video. Nobody, well, not nobody, many people did not pay attention to it. And because politics is contextual, yeah? The consciousness of that kind of behavior or that kind of emphasis by Rafidev, 7 years ago, 9 years ago, there wasn't that consciousness then, and people would look at a video like that and they wouldn't attach too much importance to it. But today, given what the PPP is doing, given the wealth that has now come to Guyana, a video like that assumes great importance and people will spot it very easily. I'm smiling because, the kind of work that people like myself do in trying to build black consciousness, of course, is derided by many people, derided by the PPP, derided by some Indians, derided by some Africans. People like me are racist, the worst racist. But I'm smiling because as I have been moving around the past couple of months, Guyana, I've been paying attention to see whether there's a rise in black consciousness among African people. Those are not things you can measure by numbers. I mean, I suppose you can do polls and research and so on. But I've been listening to the language, the political language of our people. And I can discern a shift in the political language of African Guyanese. And it's a language that is grounded more in an African identity, an African sense of self, an awareness of not just our unity as Guyanese, but also an awareness of our manyness, if I may call it that, that we are different ethnic groups function in the same space. We are united, but we are also diverse. And I see that sense of diversity. Africans have always had a problem with, because you see, African identity has always been put over slavery, and clearly nobody wants to remember the slave experience. No, and so people move quickly from that to the civic identity, the Guyanese identity and so on and so forth, at the expense of their cultural identity, because their cultural identity takes them back to slavery, in a way that Indians and Portuguese and so on, their cultural identity doesn't take them back to that terrible place, because they came after slavery ended. And so African people have always struggled with an identity-grounded sense of self. And it ebbs and flows. At the time of the Black Power movement, there was a rise in that consciousness of our identity. And then once the Black Power movement ran its course and new generations came into being, that sense of identity has subsided. And then we had the rise of the Black Matters movement, which is the new Black identity movement. And with the rise of the Black Matters movement, we see again another rise in a sense of consciousness among young Black Americans and increasingly West Indians. And our own Guyana, you know, we have struggled with the politics. Our politics, which is grounded in a non-identity kind of politics, and identity politics that has to do with our diversity. But, you know, as I said, I have discerned a rise in a sense of identity among Africans. Many people, some people may argue that that is not true. Of course, it's very difficult to measure it. And if you're starting from a place of 20% consciousness as Africans and you're moving now to 60%, you're not at 100%, but you're 40% further than you were 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And so that identity politics, I think, is now playing a role. And so a tape like the Rafi Def tape is spotted and it's circulating like wildfire among African Guyanese. Now, the Indian government has a department that is called the Diaspora Department or Overseas Department. And they encourage that Indian connection with the mother country. Some call it the Hindutva movement, coming out of the Hindu hegemony. There is an organization called the GOPIO, and they invite people, Indian leaders, every year. They have a big conference in New York. Dr. Jagan addressed that conference in 1988. And in his address, he said Indians were second-class citizens in Guyana. Not for the first time, eh? Way back in 1952-53, Dr. Jagan said the same thing in a book that he wrote. The name of the book is escaping me now, a small book. Guyana loves to quote that. And Guyana drew my attention to that since I was a young boy. And then he repeated it in 1988 at the GOPIO conference, that Indians are second-class citizens in Guyana, and that he was in favor of a Mandela solution, and that is power sharing. Of course, he reneged on that once he got power in 1992. What is also not known is that Jagan had written to the United Nations calling for partition of Guyana. Of course, partition is pinned on Guyana. But Peter de Garrett called for ideological partition. Long before Guyana had called for joint premiership with partition as a last resort. Guyana call was not for partition, it was for joint premiership.
Shared governance, as we call it now.
We call it shared governance now. Jagan had written to the United Nations, pleading that Indians were being treated badly in Guyana and the possibility of partition. You see, so there's always been that separatist trend within Indian Guyanese thought, Indian West Indian thought. There's always been that separate trend back to India. We had our Back to Africa movement, starting in the United States, and then Garvey made it popular. There was also the Back to India movement, and very strong very strong trend in Indian thought. And Rafidev comes out of that thought. And so the separatism now is not back to India. The separatism now is India in Guyana. India in Guyana. And you had Indian thinkers and religious leaders visiting Guyana since the 1940s and 1950s and urging Indians to make Guyana an Indian colony, if you will. And so when you listen to Rafidev at that conference, what you were hearing there is that strong tendency and, encouraging Indians to come to Guyana because there are opportunities in Guyana. They must come and they must invest. The notion that Indians are naturally business people and that Africans are not business people, so that there are opportunities come. You all are natural business people. Come to Guyana and invest. So come to Guyana and accumulate wealth. Of course, if there are Indians here, that will become a political advantage for the PPP and so on. But it's a strong tendency in Indian thought that there should be that strong unity between Indians at home and Indians abroad, and that is what Rafidev was expressing. They're ominous, because the way when you listen to Dev, you get the feeling that Indians control Guyana. Or even if they don't control it, they have intentions of controlling Guyana. And so they're inviting their brothers and sisters to come here and be part of that. And he was making that point when we did not start pumping oil. So you can imagine now how that tendency is very strong. So I'm saying it is both a critique of the Indian intellectual mindset. But even as I say that, I say we also have had our back to Africa, Pan-Africanist movement. There was a time when Africans came to Guyana, African Americans came to Guyana, not in large numbers. When I was at high school, I had about 2 or 3 African Americans, Pan-Africanists, who had moved to Guyana, teaching me in school. A couple of them lived in Buxton, Brother UC had visited Africa shortly after the PPP came to power, visited 13 countries, I think, African countries. Burnham was not well known in Africa at that time. And he tried to get Brother UC to become ambassador of the United Nations, and Brother UC tell him he's not a diplomat. But what he could do for him, he could go as an emissary to Africa and to introduce the Africans to the PNC government, which he did. And so when he went to Africa, he developed contacts, not just with Africans, but with African Americans who had migrated to Africa. A lot of them were in Ghana at that time. Kwame Nkrumah had come to power in 1957. And the pull of Africa had pulled lots of African Americans to Ghana. And some of them also went to Nigeria and other parts of West Africa. Maya Angelou lived in Africa at that time. And Brother Yussi had established contacts with the Africans and the African Americans and some West Indians who were there. And later on, after Nkrumah was overthrown in 1964, some of the African Americans went to Tanzania, where Nyerere had started the Ujamaa movement, African socialism. And some of them came to Guyana. Some went to Tanzania and some came to Guyana. You had people like Tom Feelings, and who's a famous African American, artists and some others whose names are escaping me now. Julian Mayfield, who came and was an advisor to Burnham. Julian Mayfield eventually married our sister Joan Cambridge. That's her husband. And there were lots of African Americans who lived in Guyana as Guyanese. Some of them stayed and they've never gone back. And saying, given that history, to say we have had our migrations from the African diaspora too. But that has waned in recent times. Yes, African Americans, for the most part, went to South Africa. When Mandela came, another group of African Americans migrated to South Africa. And so Guyana is no longer the destination for Pan-Africanists, as they used to be. The African Liberation Day, African Liberation Movement, the headquarters, the secretariat was in Guyana. Now, they still celebrate the African Liberation Day in the United States of America and other parts of the diaspora, but that secretariat was in Guyana. And a lot of that thing broke up when Guyana and Burnham fell out in 1971. The PNC moved against a lot of the African Americans who were here, those who supported Guyana, because there was a split. Some of them supported Burnham, some of them supported Guyana. The ones who supported Guyana, a lot of them were, I don't want to use the word deported, but they were pushed out of the country. So that kind of Pan-African pull to Guyana suffered when the two major African leaders fell out in 1971. But as usual, I give that long history to your question about Ravi Dev's call to Indians to come to Guyana to invest.
You know, one of the things which struck me in Ravi Dev's presentation and reminded me starkly that you always say that it's not racist to fight for your own or to represent your own, but it is racist when you put yourself for your own as superior to others. In that particular video, I heard Ravi said that the Hindu is superior.
Yeah. I have not listened to it for a very long time, but I think you might be correct in the... Well, Hinduism itself is hierarchical, eh? The caste system is very, very, very close to the race system. Race is about hierarchies of people. As I always say, race is skin color with meaning. You give meaning to skin color. And so there's a hierarchy of skin color with white at the top and black at the bottom. And then you have the various sort of colors in between, the brown people, the red people, the yellow people, etc. And when you go to the caste system, the same thing. You have the Brahmins at the top. And then you have the Dalits at the bottom. The Brahmins are the fair skin Indians and the Dalits are the dark people, black. Dalits are actually black people. So the very caste system itself is about superiority. A lot of African American scholars use what they call the color caste system because they see caste and race, which is about color, having the same kind of trajectory. And so it is not accidental when some of our Indian thinkers slip in to that notion of superiority. I'm being very careful because, like I said, I'm taking your word for it. I haven't listened to Ravi's speech for a little while. And so, but I did remember there was something there about superior and so on and so forth. See, I don't want to accuse the brother of advocating racial superiority.
You don't want to trust me either. That's my interpretation. You don't want to trust me.
But I'm saying I'm trusting you.
Except I don't want to go and spend time looking for the video and the insert and so on.
No. I recall there was reference there to superiority. I recall that distinctly.
So are we seeing this this claim of superiority, this quest to Hindu domination? Is that what we're confronted with in Guyana in an oil economy?
Well, that may very well be part of it. That may very well be part of it. I don't think that is all of it. But people are all of who they are. And you see, over time, Hinduism has given way to Indianism. Let me explain to what I mean by that. In Indian brothers, they came, some were Hindus, some were Muslims. And when they got here, some of them became Christians. And so, they do not function in the diaspora as in the political realm. They do not function as Hindus, they function as Indians. In that the Indian Christian, the Indian Muslim, and the Indian Hindu vote the same way. They see politics the same way. In Trinidad, they used to say that the Muslims were different. In fact, there was a claim that a lot of the Muslims voted for the PNM. I don't know if that is still true. But I know in Guyana, the integration of the various religions came very quickly. No, that does not mean they're not intra-Indian conflicts. I was always mesmerized as a boy to hear Hindus talk about Fulaman, meaning the Muslims. Nasty. But at the level of politics, they've become Indianized. And I think it's Brother Yusi who observed that the Indian Christian and the Indian Muslims, they are very influenced by Hinduism. So they're not Hindus, but they live in the community where Hindus are the majority. And in many regards, they become Hinduized. So it's a very complex formation, and I don't doubt that there are influences within the Indian community that are pushing the notion of superiority. You're hearing whispers that with the rise of Ali to the presidency, Muslims, Guyanese Muslims, are beginning to flex their muscles. You're hearing that a lot of the Indian capital in Guyana is grounded in the Muslim community, and that there are growing rifts between Muslims and Hindus. I hear that all the time.
There are also whispers, Dr. Hines, sorry, that despite the fact that Ali as a Muslim is head of the government is dominated by the Hindus.
Well, yes, as I said, you know, the community itself is grounded in Hinduism, even though people may be Christians or maybe, and you preempted me because I was smiling. Because when people talk about this rift between Hindus and Muslims, I don't pay too much. I'm sure there are Muslims who are trying to use the presence of a Muslim at the helm of the government in order to push for more power by Muslims in the government. I'm sure there is that. But I don't think that it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I think the all-Indian notion of politics remains very grounded, certainly at the level of leadership in the Indian community.
Thank you for that. I myself smile at times when these thoughts come to my head. Because while it's not your belief, I want to say that it's in my mind it's kind of visible in the society that there are rifts. There is this division. There is this quest for Hindu domination versus Muslim domination in the PPP. You look at the likes of Anil Nandlal and Jack Dio and Priya and so on. And one would argue that you easily see them dominate Irfan Ali. There's a rumor, let me say there's a rumor that when this rape matter broke with Dharam Lal, the allegations of rape against Dharam Lal, Ali said let the law take its course. He wanted to remove Dharam Lal from office. And Jack Dio said no, it can't happen, it would never happen.
The reason I chuckle at those things is that I am not doubting them. I'm not in the PPP, so I don't know. And I'm not, but they don't amount to much. The thing is that when we begin to entertain those thoughts in our minds, then we begin to entertain thoughts about rifts. And then when the leaders of the PPP band together, we become disappointed because the rifts are not manifested. Now, I'm sure, and like I said, I'm sure there are Muslims in and around the people who are making their moves to get a share of the wealth, but that does not mean that there is a rift. There may be competition, not rift. We have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with these things because we can become disappointed when they're not manifest. I'm sure there is competition.
The tree of life, them a wire climb, 'cause them heart no kind. Comes, I say them heart no kind. Buxton Massive, Kidaki, read that.
Never joke, never joke, never joke. Oh, money, never money, never money, money, never money, money, I know what you can even money, money, never money, never money, money, never money, money, you can keep your conniving money. When you've been a corrupt in a bill, there'll be money. Now because your money done, you come with conniving money. Then you had your pocket.
Well, I invoke the WP's position that we are engaging in civil disobedience and non-cooperation with the government. And on that grounds, I refuse to participate in the interview. The question in struggle, is not personal. Whatever sacrifice as a political activist or a political leader you have to make for your people, you have to make it.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Kadaki Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Kams TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruptions over land and sea, where the wicked politicians, they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody. With 6 races should live in harmony. Is one set of people getting aisle money. Is one set of people doing the thievery. Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time.
Good morning, morning, I your neighbor, morning. I share this live now. Share this live. I know there's a problem, but I work with it. We gotta rock and roll with it today. Sometimes you have to live with the choices and your consequences. Good morning, welcome to the program. I was just informed that one of our program directors got locked out of office. So that program director is not going to be visibly at work, but will be looking on from the outside. Right? I don't know what is the reason for the suspension. But those who fight and run away live to fight another day. Irfan Prasad said, not nasty. Yeah. Don't be nasty. Welcome. It's the 6th day of July in the what am I saying? It's the 6th day of the 7th month. Yes, the 6th of July. In the year 2023. It's like I'm feeling older by the day, man. I gotta disabuse my mind of this thing, you know. Yeah. It's consuming me. You know, a lot of the sisters, when they see one gray hair, they just lose it. Oh Lord. I'm all about salt and pepper these days. And I'm enjoying it. Welcome to the program. How have you been? How was your yesterday, your last night? What are you about this morning? What are you about this morning? I hope you had a successful and productive day yesterday. I hope you made money. Because as you see, if you don't have money in this country, you can't eat your dinner. And perhaps around the world too, right? Money buys a lot of things, including influence and freedom. Yeah. Even back in the days of slavery, when the enslaved could have worked just during the period of apprenticeship, because after they gave their 8 hours to massa, they were to be paid. And many of them were able to save up, right? And pay their way out of slavery even before the end of apprenticeship, and so on. So there are lots of things your history will tell you. See, you have to learn your history. You have to go to your history. Because your history is a good teacher, you know. There's just something about those who don't know the past will make the same mistakes in the present. And in the future, right? So it's important that we know our history. A lot of us don't like to be associated with our history. I think somebody said on a program not so long ago that a lot of us African Guyanese and black people in general, perhaps descendants of enslaved Africans, do not like to dwell in our history because slavery was not a pleasant experience, and nobody likes to dwell in unpleasantness. What if you take into consideration the fact that your history did not start with slavery? You know that there's a lot to look back on and a lot to be proud of. And so I'm encouraging you to do that daily. Good? Yesterday I said to you 100 cents make a dollar, and so I asked the question, where do you start if you want $1? We agree that the answer is at a cent. Our ancestors recognized that you have to start somewhere to get to where you wanted to. And so, as history tells us, they pooled their resources. They saved their monies. And then they fetched the nickels and dimes in wheelbarrows. And they approached Massa and said, Massa, sell away this land. Sell away this land. In my mind, they were confronted with similar problems to those we are confronted with today. How do we as a people elevate ourselves? Back then, how do we as a people elevate ourselves from freed Africans or freed enslaved Africans? Do we just accept that, label that tag, and be prepared to live on somebody's goodwill on the edge of some plantation? How do we work together as a people to elevate ourselves, elevate our status? And as history would tell us, they chose to work as a people and elevate themselves. And so they were able to leave us legacies of communities. Right? They left us legacies. A lot of the legacies we squandered. I'm being honest this morning. We squandered them. Do you agree or disagree? We squandered them. I was having a conversation with what do I consider an elder? Certainly my elder. The other day. He was telling me, he said, Kidaki as they would call me. When we were growing up, Indians didn't have land in this country. Indians didn't have land in this country. A lot of them got lands because we Africans were good to them. First and foremost, we accommodated them to live on lands that we had unused. And then as time went by, many of us sold lands to them. And today those very people are turning around and fight us for lands. Old people say ingratitude was than witchcraft. Y'all ever heard that one? Ingratitude worse than witchcraft. And so, I guess we can call many of them Nimakaram. I'm grateful. Because our ancestors came to the rescue, if you can call it that. And in return, the next generation are hounding us and trying to force us to live on the edge of plantation Guyana. Do you recognize Guyana as a plantation? When certain people make these one-word comments, I like to ask, what are you saying? Express yourself in complete thoughts. What is disrespectful out front parts? Yes. They're trying to force us to live on the edge of plantation Guyana. Why plantation Guyana? Why plantation Guyana? Because that is what Guyana is, a plantation. Your history will tell you that the British and the Dutch and the Spanish and the French and all of them many of us lump it together and say the Europeans. They came to this place and they extracted the wealth and they took it back to their homelands because they saw this place as a plantation. Right? Guyana was a place of primary production. Use the land and plant sugarcane, we're going to extract it and carry it to Great Britain, and we're going to make sweeteners and plant cotton and so on and so forth. So it was a plantation and it still is a plantation. If you look at the way the PPP treats Guyana, let me don't go to the PPP yet. If you look at the way Guyana is treated by various ethnic groups. The various ethnic groups, you'll come to realize, that the only two ethnic groups in this country, in my mind, that treat Guyana as though it is their home is the Amerindians and the Africans, descendants of Amerindians and Africans. They got more love, they got more patriotism, they value this land more than anybody else. The Portuguese, years ago, the Asmolite referred to them as what? Portuguese mafia. Many of them acquire wealth here and they take it elsewhere, where they have their homes. They live here, but they got their homes elsewhere. Their comfort zones are elsewhere, so they acquire their wealth here by exploiting the resources here, and they expatriate, I think is the word, the wealth to their homes. The Chinese do the same thing. I'm going to tell you something about the Chinese you might know or might not know. They do the same thing. People complain about Chinese businesses being successful in forcing every other business out of business and establishing themselves almost in every community across Guyana and so on. And they sell things cheap and so on and so forth. But do you know that the Chinese do not pay taxes in this country? At least import duties, they don't. It is my understanding that every container that is consigned, the Chinese business in this country is consigned to the Chinese embassy. So through the diplomatic relations, anything consigned to the Chinese embassy is not taxable. So all the Chinese containers and so on, from my understanding, comes into this country tax-free. And then they get distributed to the individual owners. It's like a diplomatic bag. Right? The Chinese Association, located in Brickdam, looks out for the Chinese in this country so that they can get an unfair business advantage. Along with other things, they provide funding and so on for the establishment of businesses. A few days ago, I asked who are the owners and operators of the Bank of Baroda, and what are the arrangements with the Bank of Baroda for funding startup businesses for Indo-Guyanese. What's the role of the Chinese Association and the Chinese Embassy in Guyana in relation to startup businesses and so on for Chinese? My understanding is that they provide financing, they provide the necessary training and support. And those of you who like to eat Chinese food and so on, perhaps you can pay attention to that. Ever so often, they rotate out their business owners. So you might see a young Chinese couple operating Kingzing restaurant, and they're there for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they just disappeared. The restaurant is never closed, but they just disappeared, and you'll see another Chinese couple operating it. And sometimes you go to some other part of the country and you see those who are operating Kingzing at another one. Right? So I'm saying that these people have systems in place, and they're working those systems to their advantage and maximizing their economic benefits on this plantation named Guyana. Because what do they do with their profits? It go back home. They send it back home. The Indo-Guyanese, you are Ravidef, come to this plantation. In all of the sectors that we have, we're going to ensure that you get settled. Come to the plantation and make money. What will happen when they make that money? It gets sent back home. I know at least one Indian businessman who has a business at a junction or just in the vicinity of Wellington and Regent. A very popular guy, sells cosmetics and stuff like that. Very popular guy. And one day I walked into the store and he's not there. I asked one of his customers, his workers, "This man there, he gone home." Says, "Who running the business?" This is his father and his sister. Right? So they come to this plantation, they exploit the resources, they enrich themselves, and then they either go back home or send the resources home, and they go every now and again to vacation and come back. But if you look at the ethnic build-up of this country, you recognize that 4 out of the 6 ethnic groups can do that. But the indigenous, the Amerindians, they're from here. Where is home for them except Guyana? The descendants of enslaved Africans, for the greater part, have not established a relationship with the homeland of their foreparents. And so where is home for them? Right here. And while they have made the sacrifice to tame and develop this land, and like I said earlier, accommodate others as they came, they are now in a situation where they're being forced to live on the edge of plantation Guyana. Right? The question is, how do we ensure that we don't get forced to the edge of plantation Guyana? Are we placing our hopes or all of our hopes in a BLINKIN visit? Huh? What can a BLINKIN visit do to give us back a foothold in this society? Why are we celebrating? Because a lot of people are celebrating. A lot of people are joyous. A lot of people are seeing a light at the end of this dark tunnel, because there will be a BLINKIN visit today. But that BLINKIN visit will only last at most, in my mind, for about 8 hours tops. There will be a flurry of activities, I'm sure, in government quarters. What will be the role of the opposition in this BLINKIN visit? Are they going to have an opportunity to sit with Secretary of State BLINKIN and pour their hearts out and complain as much as they can and will? And if they do, what happens after? What happens after if they do? Are we going to see a change in attitude of the PPP? And if there's a change in the attitude of the PPP, are we going to see a change in the attitudes of the Hindus? The support base of the PPP? The other ethnic groups which have enriched themselves at the expense of Afro-Guyanese? Are we going to see a change in their attitudes? What will those changes look like? Will those changes empower us? Or will they provide opportunities, possibilities for our empowerment? Those are some of the things I want you to think about this morning. Will a Blinken visit result in Nigel Darmlal being charged, along with all those other people, including Priyamanik Chand and Vindhya Prasad and Superintendent, what's his name? Sham something, can't remember, who have all participated in the perversion of the course of justice, along with all of those other pedophiles associated with the PPP, associated with the corridors of power, who have been going into the interior regions and advantaging the first people, the indigenous people. Are we going to see them being placed before the courts? Are we going to see a return of co-op lands to those predominantly African Guyanese managed co-op societies? Are we going to see the reemployment of African Guyanese professionals like Colvin Heath, London, Vincent Adams, I think this guy's name was Colin Bino. Is it Colin Bino? Bino at was part of the oil and gas management there. Are we going to see fair employment practices for African Guyanese? These are all issues which have a direct impact on the state of mind and the state of the economics for African Guyanese. Are you saying that a Blinken visit is going to bring positive changes in all of these directions? Desiree Smart Felix said, wow. Like I usually ask, what is that wow about, Desiree? I just looked at the comments. I'm asking these questions because I can ask them. Is it? Or because I sincerely believe that when we can answer these questions and answer them honestly, we will do some serious soul searching and we will come to a point of understanding that the salvation, the survival of the generations the inheritors of the legacies of the enslaved Africans is dependent not on what these other ethnic groups do is dependent not on a visit from Blinken, but is really and truly wholly and solely dependent on what we as a people do. As African Guyanese, as descendants of the enslaved Africans. Do you recognize that? It's dependent a whole lot on what we do. Because like we rightly say, you can take the ass to the grass, but you can't make it eat. So Blinken can come and Blinken can influence and Blinken can demand, perhaps, I don't know if they can demand, I don't know if the PPP listens and acts on any demands of Blinken and the US. But external influence can be activated. But unless we recognize those opportunities and capitalize on them, we'll just remain right where we are. Agreed? So the question is, what are you prepared to do to ensure that you don't have to live on the edge of plantation Guyana? But that you take your rightful place. What do you have to do? What are you prepared to do? Derek Kisun asks, sir, you promoting racism? If so, you must be investigated. Let's call for investigations of those who are promoting racism. There's a video out there with Ravi Dev promoting racism. There are videos out there with Roshan Khan, Elijah Roshan Khan promoting racism. There's a video out there with a chap they call Gaza. Silent black man also a party and invite Silent black man and poison them out. Promoting racism. There's a video with Granny in quarantine promoting racism. So let's get these investigations going. What have we named Derek Kisu? Let's do that. Are we ready? Let's investigate Bar Jagdeo, who Freddie Kisun said is an ideological racist. Because above all else, Bar Jagdeo really and truly should be of interest to everybody when it comes to racism in this country, for the simple fact that he wields power in this country, dominates the Muslim president. Hindu Bar Jagdeo dominates the Muslim president in this country. Let's investigate that. How about us investigating Vinay Prasad? Because there are lots of allegations over at Ministry of Social Services against her for ethnic preference. Lots of African Guyanese who were seniors at that ministry when she took it over have either been parked in a corner or have been forced into retirement, etc. Why don't we investigate that? Why don't we? Let's investigate the DPP. And the PPP for racism or promoting racism. Why don't we? Let's investigate if it's not a racist government that will feel obligated to consult with a predominantly Indo-Guyanese community in places like oil and industry. Then they're talking about the construction of a 4-lane highway on the railway embankment, but refuse from the inception to consult with a predominantly African Guyanese community, Plaisance, which is right next door to oil and industry. Let's investigate if that's not racism at play. Listen, there's so much we can investigate. I need to take a break. Don't have to explain, don't need to explain, won't explain. But I need to take a short break. Listen to TACUMA OGUNSEYE talk about sacrificing for your people. Because if it means that I have to be investigated for speaking the truth, then go right ahead and have me investigated.
I invoke the WPA's position that we are engaging in civil disobedience and non-cooperation with the government, and on that grounds I refuse to participate in the interview. The question in struggle, is not personal. Whatever sacrifice as a political activist or a political leader you have to make for your people, you have to make it.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Kams TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruptions over land and sea, where the wicked politicians they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody. With 6 races should live in harmony. Is one set of people getting aisle money. Is one set of people doing the tea for repeat. Guyanese Morning Time, the people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. This is a program that you all can see. Sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, which has ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, fooling the people. You promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. Stop fooling people. You promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. I say Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. They got Breakford, Bork and Mark Benchtop. David Hines and Kadaki Amsterdam. Sherrod Duncan, Nigel London. Normal Brown and Gavin Matthews. Big up Paslow, Port People Governor. Simona Brooms, Robin Simpson. Hampton Green and Winston Jordan. And yes, we can go right on and on. Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again.
The relatives and friends of young Quinton Bacchus, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of our in Boston, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of Peter Headley, they deserve justice.
And so when we say that Guyana is an apartheid state, we have the evidence to show.
FMPSAT tells us they can apply for work in the public sector, in the private sector. Who can apply for work in the private sector? I just want to ensure we are on the same plane when we're having these discussions. It's now what? 9 minutes past the 8 o'clock number. Yeah, 9 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour. Who can apply for work in the private sector? Do you agree with me that, you know, people, we have to be very careful of what advice we take, quite frankly. We have to be very careful of the advice we take from people. Sometimes we think that they're well-intentioned, but they say don't look a gift horse in the mouth. When our ancestors were brought on these shores as enslaved Africans, or to be enslaved as Africans, the people who were buying them and bringing them were looking all down in the throat, in their ears, in the anus. Why we mustn't watch gift horses in the mouth? We must examine them closely, because they are also Trojan horses that can be giving us gifts. Why is it okay for other people to be business owners? Owners of enterprises. But African Guyanese must satisfy themselves with either working in the public sector or the private sector. Why? It's a new form of slavery. Why must the descendants of freed, enslaved Africans allow themselves to be enslaved in a different form, in a different era? Because we haven't learned anything. Yeah? Because we haven't learned anything. How is it these other ethnic groups in this country are facilitated when it comes to the establishment and operation of big businesses? But African Guyanese, the descendants of freed and enslaved Africans, are given the royal runaround, are given the hardest time when it comes to getting involved in enterprise. Y'all talk to me. It's like I was saying just prior to the local government elections. I hate to go back there, but I will say it. because it has the same bearing on the national elections. Be careful of the advice of people telling you, go to the elections and vote them out or vote against them. As against standing up and fight for the postponement, cancellation of holding of any elections under this current regime at GECOM. It's a trap. As long as you participate with the current rules, you can't win. You can't win. You might get a toe in, a leg in. But will you be standing on solid ground? My answer is no. And if you're not standing on solid ground, you're not getting a firm footing in the society in which you live, a society which your ancestors built. Then you're losing. Because what you're standing on will slip from under your feet. And you're going to get, eventually going to fall off the edge. You ever play King for the Land? Yeah. Yeah, I had childhood days. Did you ever play King for the Land? We used to play King for the Land over Company Bridge, Company Trench. That famous Company Canal, as people call it. With those high-rise bridges, we call them, I see they're calling them kissing bridges. Well, I don't know if we call them kissing bridge back when we were growing up. But those bridges were elevated over the trench so that boats could pass underneath as they go to the back dam and they come from the back dam with produce. We played King for the Land and that. If you were on the edge, it was easier to push you off. But when you're on the middle, you confront your opposition, your challenger in the middle, and you have serious battles in the middle to see who is going to get pushed over the edge. And so the question is, where are we as a people on this land that we are fighting, we want to play King for the Land? Where are we as a people? Are we centralized enough to really fight? Are we positioning ourselves? Your child and I don't even care how much racist they call me. I'm going to tell you the purpose of calling people racist in this country. Especially calling black people racist. Are we centralized enough to really fight and defend our territory in this land that some people want to fight us and play King for the Land for? If not, why not? And what should we do to ensure that we position ourselves in a much more central way to fight? Why other people have an unfair advantage over us? Have you ever asked yourself that? I will tell you it's because they control a lot of what we depend on. What are we good at as a people? What are we good at as a people? When we can recognize what we're good at as a people, maybe we can leverage that. I am sure many will say, hey, y'all good at providing services. Y'all got excellent lawyers and doctors and so on. But have you paid attention to where other people leverage? Sometimes these things only occur, as we like to say, by chance to me. I was having a conversation earlier today. A lot of y'all think I was in bed. I was having a conversation about training and education, academics versus skill. Irfan Prasad tells us, let them apply for work in the private sector. First and foremost, the private sector in this society is dominated by the people who don't like us. And since every cow cries for its own calf, the people who dominate the private sector will save the best for their people. And then what is left for us? The crumbs. Just as it is in the public sector. We're left with the crumbs. But take a peek over at your neighbor and you're going to realize if you want a machine shop, you want a mechanic, you want a welder, you want a auto electrician. Just those four, let me look at them. Where do we turn to? Who dominates those four skill areas? Auto electrician with the concentration of motor vehicles in this country, I bet you can't go hungry. At least 2 vehicles will come to you on any given day. Mechanic, same thing. Welder, same thing. What's the other one I mentioned? Can't remember. But just but you tell your children going to write 1960 subjects to go work in the public sector? We want to have boutiques. Let me don't say boutique. Let me say hairdressing salon. I mean, every day somebody might want to do the hair. But every second somebody has to eat. We have to start leveraging. We have to start leveraging. We have to start leveraging. We have to find ways and means of centralizing ourselves on that bridge, on this plantation, if we really want to play king for the land and retain our rightful places. But leadership is important, right? Leadership starts from the home. We as parents have to provide leadership to our children so that they walk in the right direction to help us to come back central. When 40 children enroll in a school, all of them are looking forward to graduating that school. Assume all of them graduate. All of them will graduate with the same education. Not the same knowledge. Or is it the other way around? What is knowledge versus education? Right? But all of them would have gone through the same period of time of study, assumably write the same number of subjects, pass the same number of subjects. What makes your child different? What gives your child the edge for success? We have to start identifying those things and work them. Leadership. Community leadership. We have to sit in our communities and bring our children together, our young people together, our residents together, and help them to understand what needs to be done for us to get back to the center of that bridge if we're going to play king for the land. Many of you think you know answers. Many of you, I'm sure, know the answers. Many of you are privy to information that is 9 years old. The question is, how do we use that information to leverage? I can't sit here and tell you everything. Like I say, I'm not the custodian of all knowledge. But I'm saying no. At 24 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour. Whether we get pushed off the edge of this plantation known as Guyana, because we're already at the edge, or we get to reposition ourselves on this plantation named Guyana, is dependent on what we as a people do. It's dependent on what the leaders among us do. And we gotta start doing it now. It's long overdue, but we could start now. We could play catch up. We can't rest our hope on a BLINKIN visit. And just for clarity here, I'm using the pun. I learned the pun as a part of my academic growth. Secretary of State BLINKIN is visiting. But a BLINKIN visit cannot and will not be the answer to all of our troubles. So y'all give me a BLINKIN chance and start doing the BLINKIN work. The lines are open. 6225933 is the number to call. You tune to the Guyanese Morning Time. And if you don't know how we use BLINKIN in the communities and in this country, BLINKIN is a placeholder for something that is more unpleasant if used in the public. Some people call it indecent language. Some people call it industrial language. You choose which one you want it to be. The lines are open. 6225933. You're tuned to the Guyanese Morning Time. And we're reasoning, because that's all I'm doing this morning, reason with you. BLINKIN, as in Secretary of State, will not be able to prevent rape of your underage children, because he will not be at your doors. He's not going to be the head of your homes. He's not going to be the leadership of your communities. They say stroke of the government, why is it the populace? The US might register its discontent with the way Amerindian children are treated in this country, with the way African Guyanese are treated in this country. But the PPP might have a comeback to say, Yes, we recognize that we weren't in the first instance doing enough for them. But in recent times, we have started to address that. We sent the Vice President to Plaisance to address the concerns of non-consultation, and we are now giving them 6 months to move. But you still got to move. How does that stop your rape and the destruction of your economic base? It doesn't. It just delays it. But the same pain you're going to feel when, according to the boys, your pleats get depleted. The lines are open. 6225933 is the number to call. You tune to the Guyanese Morning Time. I always get a message that makes me smile from some way or other in the morning. Thank you, Madam Program Director. They say don't underestimate the wisdom of age, you know. Call it live, good morning.
Morning to Daki and morning Guyana. So much things to ponder in Guyana, land of water, land of many water, but yet still you can't get good water to drink. BLINKIN coming to Guyana poses lots of opportunity, but the question is, would the Guyanese people take advantage of that? Because by him coming alone, it speaks a lot of volume of the status Guyana have gained. And we often wonder why they're coming. They're coming to actually get more of the pie. They've already gotten a lot of the pie. They're getting more. One of the questions that I would have is that how long this trip was actually planned, and would the opposition would actually be in the plan of BLINKIN to speak to. I've heard that we need to talk to Hakeem's referees and all the others, but it's up to the Guyanese people, in my opinion, to show what's happening in Guyana by lining the streets where they're going to be, to show what a really terrible situation we're in. But if we don't show anything, then the visit would just be looked at as a success for the PPP, that they're able to get the United States Secretary of State to come to Guyana, and we haven't showed them anything of what's going on. Now, I just saw a post, the resignation of the Amiral. It doesn't mean that rape is a good thing. It just says that they have made strategic moves in order to appease and to lull the Guyanese people to sleep and to give the United States a false sense of, well, things are being done. It is up to the Guyanese people, and it's always will be up to the Guyanese people to make the difference. And it just seems like in every situation, it is just African Guyanese that are actually standing up. Others are benefiting, but it's always the African Guyanese that are, doing these things. We are bringing issues to the forefront, while 95% of the Indian Guyanese just twiddle their thumbs and go along with that. We've got a lot of African men that simply refuse to take up and to see what's happening to their people, hence leaving the women in these positions to always fight in these battles. And we got to look at where we're going to be in the next 10, 15 years. And it doesn't look good because we're not educating our youngsters on why we're where we are today. With 65 African organizations in Guyana, and we're in this situation, it just tells us we have not done enough with liberating Guyana and what we've accomplished over the time to allow Indians to now take it over and run you down. So the question is, where do we see ourselves in the next 5, 10, and 15 years? And if anything we can look back on is the past 23 years, now 26 years of the racist mafia PPP. And if anyone in Guyana can tell me we have done better, they better have their head examined. And that's my take.
Thank you for your call. I want to tell you something. I see, I've been observing Irfan Prasad for the whole week, you know. Remember, this man is an intellectual. He lectured at the University of Guyana. Caller, hold the line, please. But I want to tell y'all, while I got respect for education and academics, I ain't got respect for people who tell themselves that they could outsmart me. Book sense and road sense. Irfan Prasad keeps saying all week that the Indians accumulated wealth from agriculture and so on in the earlys and so on and so forth. And he keep talking that nonsense here. The Indians were given an unfair advantage because they came here as wage labor. Indentureship, they didn't work for free. While we worked for free to lay the foundations and develop this nation, when the Indians came, they were earning. And when their period of indentureship was finished, they were gifted lands. They were gifted lands. So they got 2 bites from the same cake. The African Guyanese, they freed Africans, despite having worked all of their, or most of their life for free. The pittances that they got during the period of apprenticeship, they had to take it and buy lands. So the Indians were able to accumulate capital because they were wage labor on the plantations, even though indentured. They were gifted lands on which they can now use that capital to develop things. The Africans who accumulated capital through this small pay they received during indentureship had to expend all of that capital to acquire land on which they wished to build things. So Irfan Prasad, I beg, but I ain't stupid. I never lectured at a university, but I'm sure I'm capable of, and I might do a damn better job than you, because in my retirement age, I won't be blogging, trolling for the PPP and talking crap as though I never had an education. Call it live, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Mr. Amsterdam.
Caller, you're live, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Amsterdam, good morning. I'm calling from the US. Mr. Amsterdam, there's 2 points I want to raise this morning. One, I can't remember the exact day that the last election that we had in Guyana. Are you there?
Yes, caller.
Okay, the last election that we had in Guyana, I remember one incident that Vice President Barajagio had said, and all what is going on in Guyana, and not one soul has raised this point. I try to get onto all the program every day. I'm not getting through. I'm from Guyana. I'm from the village called Belgium, West Coast Bobbies. Mr. Barajagyo had said at one of his rally that if they want David Granger to put all the black men in the Guyana police force and the Guyana defense force, them will be going to the interior area to rape all the Amerindian children them. What happened today? Who is the one doing the raping? This thing is sending really, it is not good for Guyana. Mr. Let me explain what. Mr. Dayamlal should not be walking the street. Anybody in the world had been accused of raping not even a 16-year-old, a woman in the hole. A woman in the hole would have to be in jail. How can you have gone on a $1 million station bail? For what? You commit the offense. Why you go on $1 million station bail? Barrett Jagyo had said that David Granger going to put all the black men them in the Guyana police force and the Guyana defense force, so when they could go to the Amerindian village, they could rape these young people. What happened today? Oh, you not hear Barrett Jagyo, you not hear Ashley Singh, you not hear none of the PPP. I really don't care anything about the PPP party. I will not sell my soul. There's nobody in Guyana can say that PPP has done well. PPP did not do nothing, especially for the black people. People just come in the air and try to polish up this thing. PPP party is racial party. Story done. That's the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you for your call. You're tuned to the Guyanese Morning Time. It's 20 minutes to the 9 o'clock hour. I'm your host, the Buxtonian. I'm from Buxton, Kams Tv. Oh, shoot, so just remember. Voice note.
Good morning, Kadaki. I think you should encourage the people to try to... Good morning, Kadaki. I think you should encourage the people to try to bring BLINKIN's attention, other than trying to discourage them, that saying BLINKINs cannot make a difference, in your words. Now, I am not no Bible person, but I remember the story with the woman who was very desperate. She was very needy, and the most powerful man in the world was passing through the village. And it's got to be stupid of anyone to know that the most powerful man is passing through your village and you have needs and will not make an attempt to bring that man's attention to your needs. And that woman just touched the hem of the garment of that man, and she brought his attention to her. In other words, desperation has power. Tell anyone I say this, desperation has power, force. Now you should encourage the people to go there. If they get a disturbed traffic this morning, disturbed traffic, and bring the attention to BLINKINs as to what is going on in Guyana. You know, because it is not nice. Change can come true, even though he's coming on one particular thing. Protest can make him ask the question, what is going on out there? And he can pay attention and he can address issues. Thank you.
You know, I generally don't respond to voice notes, but when people accuse me of certain things, I have to respond. Did this caller hear me tell people not to bring anything to BLINKIN's attention? He said my words. Did I tell anybody not to bring anything to BLINKIN's attention? I'm asking the question again, what a BLINKIN visit will achieve if we We are not prepared to do what we have to do. Maybe it wasn't that clear. Just bringing your problems to the attention of Blinken or whoever you want to is the solution. Now give me a Blinken chance. Call it live.
Yes, Mr. Gadaki. I think you should go further and clarify the Blinken visit. Here's why I say so. Today is a day for protest. But let me say good morning to all people in Guyana and good morning to all Guyanese. But today is a day for protest on several fronts. And I think you also, I listened keenly and I heard you say something outside of the visit. So I did hear you suggesting subtly that we should also protest. And I think the other point you're making, that after Blinken come and gone, after Pompeo come and gone, after Sarah Lynch come and gone, we're still left with the problem. And I think that you're also saying that. So I'm for protest today. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if we block off that road, is it Duke Street? Block off the left, block off the right. He got to go to the... Where you think Blinken gonna stay? At the Pegasus? Where we think Blinken gonna stay? Blinken got to stay at the United States Embassy. That's where he gonna sleep, ain't it? Okay, he has to check in there. He has to go there. So I don't know what people talking about, lining off the road here and lining off the road there. Do all your lining off on Duke Street. Isn't it Duke Street? To the left of Duke, if that's the street. Light to the left of it, to the right of it. He got to pass there. And when he come, he will want to know, why is my embassy blocked off with protesters? He will ask the question, why is my embassy blocked off? His security detail will want to know, and this has to be reported. Security matters have to be escalated up the chain, and if they are serious enough, I'm not saying attack the entourage, I'm not saying that. I'm saying block off the road, it's your country, and you're demonstrating your protest, you're demonstrating your concern. Sandra Granger, our First Lady, I want to know what's her input on this Amerindian abuse issue. Today is a day for Sandra Granger to put up or shut up. She can't dry in the corner as our First Lady when we were doing everything we could do for Amerindians. Simona Broom's out there. Everybody on the streets for the Amerindians. So what good is it to have a First Lady? She's Amerindian. Today, tomorrow, we win the election petition. She is the First Lady. She got to put up. And the PNC General Secretary, she's Amerindian too. Miss Hastings Williams. She's been out there. I hope these people are organizing with the Tush House to be out there to represent once and for all for Amerindians. Amerindians been abused ever since Christopher Columbus' time. We understand that we've got to take the horse and control the horse, or the bull by the horn. I'm not saying that we are begging Mr. Blinken to do anything for us all the time. But today, the man is coming to the country. And if we're going to talk global and geopolitics, and how are we going to talk geopolitics? And we can't even do geopolitics on Guyana, and the man coming. Why did we stop? Why did they stop the train in Buxton? Tell me that. Anybody could tell me that? Why did they stop the train in Buxton, and what came out of stopping the train in Buxton? Maybe the historians could tell me. The purpose of stopping the train in Buxton was for a purpose. To get his attention. And we got their attention. How are we going to get their attention today? today. Do we need to get their attention? Another point. In the PNC and the opposition, there is a minister of protocol. So what is the minister of protocol arranging for this visit? Who is the person in the PNC and the opposition in charge of protocol? Part of protocol is that when these dignitaries come, they normally have a open door policy with the opposition arm of the government. Keep in mind that they're coming to visit the Guyanese government, and the opposition is part of that government. I don't see, and I want Cameron Norton to hear me clearly, I don't see how is it that we are arguing for inclusivity, and President Biden and Kamala Harris and Hakeem Jeffries and the Congressional Black Caucus are talking that there needs to be more inclusivity. And then when they come here, when Blinken come here, he doesn't have a sit down and invite the opposition on the platform of inclusivity. I can't see how that would happen. But the question we want to know, we got to put pressure to bear on the protocol officer in the PNC, in the opposition. Because we need to say, where is our seat at the bargaining table today? Mr. Kadaki, is Hakeem Jeffries also coming or not?
Not.
Okay. Fine. He'll get the message anyway. Because that's how the
and
people
since you
operate.
paused to ask that question, let me tell you, Blinken will not be sleeping in Guyana. Continue.
Okay, well, he would not be sleeping in Guyana. I'm glad you clarified that. But he would have to at least go to the embassy. I'm certain about that. He would have to at least go to the embassy. So, we need to strategize. But we cannot just allow the man to come and do nothing. So that's why I'm pointing out that while we are putting pressure on Blinken, and while we are putting pressure on ourselves, part of putting pressure on ourselves is also putting pressure on Sandra Granger. And part of also putting pressure on our First Lady, we must also understand where we must apply pressure within the PNC and within the coalition, because they have a responsibility to act like they are part of the government today, to have an audience with the Secretary of State on our issues. And if they don't do that, then we must say, y'all is negligent. You mean gold given away, and y'all ain't position yourself to get some of the gold, and y'all are part of the opposition? Now, people may say that, oh, they could meet. It ain't the first time that the opposition has an opportunity to meet with the Secretary of State. They could meet in the United States. But what we're saying is on our issue, we should be talking, asking for a town hall meeting or some kind of audience, whereby one or two observers might have a little sit down. But this is all something that protocol arranges.
Coffee.
Yes, sir.
Who's responsible for protocol when the U.S. Secretary of State visits?
Well, let me say there is a chain of command for protocol. There is a chain of command of protocol in there. The missions officer, right? The ambassador and the Secretary of State. They have a protocol section in there. And Guyana has a protocol section. CARICOM has one too. Okay? And let me say a quick example of protocol.
Coffee.
When you have a seat. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My question was specific to the U.S. Secretary of State visiting. Who is responsible for protocol?
I don't exactly know who.
Okay. Protocol.
But there
the responsibility for protocol is going to fall with the U.S. Embassy and the government of Guyana. And only Christ could convince me.
Opposition is part of that.
Yes. Only Christ could convince me that the U.S. Embassy and much less the government of Guyana will allow Blinken in a, what we say, town hall meeting. The first and most potent argument from the government of Guyana is we can't protect him there. Continue.
Yeah, okay, good. Now, let me say this. The Secretary of State will be coming with his security detail. That's part of security protocol. He will be coming with part of his security detail. And in that embassy, they got the necessary persons to provide the security. And they're probably in the country already before he arrives. Okay, they're already in the country before he arrives. And they will come on that big plane, and they got plenty Marines to be on the plane, but I don't want to get bogged down with that. The opposition leader has a protocol arm, and he is part of the government. He's just a minority part of the government. Now, the point I was trying to drive is that one of the biggest issues the opposition has been complaining about is inclusivity. Inclusivity in how the administration of the government is dealing with the opposition. But it is not only Guyana opposition that's been complaining about that. President Biden wrote a letter to Irfan Ali on that issue. Kamala Harris touched on that. Hakeem Jeffries touched on that. And Sheila Jackson-Lee, when she shook Irfan's hand, she said, two things you could do, Irfan, is to deal with inclusivity and equity in Guyana. So it has been on the agenda at the forefront of inclusivity. So I can't see how the opposition, let me say this, the opposition has to have known. They had to have known that Blinken was coming. They had to have known. It's protocol.
Coffee wrap up.
It is protocol. Yes, sir. So what I'm saying to our people is that the opposition has to step up. And I can't see how they're going to be trying to step up on this late hour. They should have been in the loop. And I want our people, voters, to know that our leaders should have known. And if they didn't know, they should have endeavored to know. Because that's protocol. So they can't tell us when the man comes that they didn't have some kind of audience. That's unacceptable. Because good opportunities would be wasted. That's what the point I'm trying to make. And Sandra Granger, as our First Lady, can't tell me that she doesn't know that she has an obligation to step up for the Amerindian people and all women on this damn lally issue. And they need to be out there in the Amerindian garb. So people can see Amerindians or indigenous people protesting against the abuse of indigenous people. Once again, thank you for listening.
Thank you for calling. Sometimes I have to be like the judge. I have to wield a gavel or a big stick. Sometimes we speak on a lot of assumptions. Protocol dictates or suggests, call Holy Line, that the Secretary of State coming to Guyana, provision will be made for him to have some interaction with the opposition representative or representatives. Until that visit takes place and comes to an end, we cannot say that the opposition did not take advantage of the visit, did not take the opportunity to have audience with the visitor. No. And listening to Kofi, I'm hearing him say basically that the opposition has failed to do this. I am willing to wait. My expectation is that the opposition would have already had its invite to meet with the Secretary of State, whether as one person or an entourage. But I'm also saying, the premise of my discourse this morning is, I don't care who talks with Blinken. At the end of the day, unless the people, the citizens, are prepared to do what they should do, or are expected to do, or ought to do, nothing will change. A country is not necessarily managed by remote control where you press off and it shuts down, the government shuts down. Or you press change channel and the government changes channel or changes the way they behave. People are central to everything that happens in the government, everything that happens in the country. And that's all I'm saying. I didn't say don't go out and protest and let your presence be seen by Blinken. You ought to. But people are of the opinion that only a protest today will make Blinken aware of what is happening in Guyana. Blinken is well aware of what is happening in Guyana long now. Maybe you want to rub it in, as we say, on his visit. But what happens after that? What are we as the oppressed? We were forced to the edge. We were almost on the periphery, willing to do and accept that we must do to get back a foothold in a central way. That's my question this morning. Caller, thank you for holding your life.
Hi, good morning, Kadaki. Blessings to you. I'm so happy that you offered that clarification in your last statement, and I'm going to plus one it. I think one of the things I want to just say quickly is we must not be a short-sighted people, and it is also important for us to not run after the shiny object, because oftentimes we are essentially proactive rather than we are reactive, rather than being proactive in situations. And I think just looking at a collective response to the incident regarding this young lady that was allegedly raped by a sitting minister, I think as a country we have failed collectively to respond in a manner that we are sending a message not only to the government, but if we are trying to get and gain the attention of the international community, there should be a resounding pronouncement of our position. And that is the greatest power that we have, and it was by way of protest. And we sat on it as a nation collectively. So I am of the humble opinion, and I fully agree with your perspective, that having Blinken being in the country is one mechanism of protest for awareness. But I think what we should have been doing before Blinken's coming is that you should have had tens of thousands of people on the street all across Guyana protesting, because the mechanism of media and news is the fastest ways to which information gets communicated and travels. And so we have continued to have missed opportunities, and now we are on this perspective of, well, Blinken is coming and we should, yes, we should do that, and we should have been shutting down Guyana. Everywhere in Guyana should have been protests, and by now we would have had a message and an agenda for Blinken when his arrival to then address the widespread protests all across Guyana. It would have illuminated and magnified the full picture of the issues of Guyana, and this was a red letter and a huge moment that we have significantly missed. And so I would advise my people to not chase after the shiny object. But if we want to be proactive rather than reactive, we would be on the streets until the government responds with an appropriate arrest as well as a day in court for Darren Lal. We would also be on the streets to be responding to the government with some of the atrocities and the marginalization that is happening in Guyana. And like I always say, power concedes nothing without a demand. And so forget about Blinkin's coming. This is beyond Blinkin's coming and departure. And you're absolutely right. It is about what we are supposed to be doing consistently and sustained so that we demand what is ours. And until we are willing to do that, there will be multiple Blinkins and they will come and go. In the United States, when we had the Black Lives protest all across this country, where I participated as a black person in America, and we didn't get off the streets until there was enough attention raised in a way that we demanded from the government to pay attention to our plight. And it is the same formula that my brothers and sisters in Guyana must do in order to be able to have the Blinkins of the world, to be able to pay attention to their issues and to our issues. If we don't, the Blinkins will come and they will leave, and there will still be nothing to address on behalf of the people of Guyana. So we must do something in order to get a response that we're looking for. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, caller.
Kodaki, good morning to you and the listening public. Of all the talk shows he has on the airwaves, your talk show is one of the most edifying talk shows. I have been listening to your talk show from the beginning to this day. And I have learned a lot. And you have motivated me a lot from your talk show. Sometimes I want to know where you obtain all of your information from, and you are very accurate. Keep the good work, my brother. On my voice note this morning, I don't really send much voice note to you because I have my way in expressing myself, and I love to use indecent language. And when I send voice note to you, you don't play them because of my indecent language. So because of that, I avoid sending voice note. Now, I appreciate that you are defending your people, which is my people too, and you are trying to edify our people. But Kadaki, our people has a big problem, Kadaki. You could imagine a Negro man go to school, and he obtain a few subjects, and he move on to university, get a degree or a diploma. When he finish, he or she run and go and work for the government. That thing annoys me a lot. Why is it that one that obtains such a good level of education cannot muzzle or use that education to convert it into a business, that they can grow a business and become a business official? Why is it they always run into the government for a job? And that is why the government are bullying black people, right? Because they realize that black people are only working for the government and they work for a salary. And because of that salary, they cannot maintain themselves properly at the end of the month, much less to save. So the government knows that black people don't have money because they are lacking business and all they're doing is looking for a job or they are lying on the street. I say these things about my people because I'm a businessman. And sometimes I offer my own people job before anyone else. And Kadaki, the attitude and the style they put up, brother, I don't know where we are going, right? Now, we need to start. A man once said something to me that you can learn 3 ways. If you can read books from your mistake and from other people's mistake. But if we can look at these people and see what they are doing and learn from them and indulge in the same thing, how are we going to make it, brother? How are we going to make it? I'm not saying this about black people because I hate black people, because I'm angry about what they are doing and how they're applying strategy to life. But like Kadaki, some they say go a spoon and serve a spoon. I born with no spoon in my mouth. No spoon. I came up so poor. And I have started business from zero, very small. In 2015, I've started my business and I fall because of lack of finance. In 2017, start over back again in 2018, small. And to this day, my business is a medium-sized business. Or you could say large, because present now, I am making $1 million a month profit, present now, right? And why is it other black brothers and sisters can't start a business from small and become business people, entrepreneur? Why is it they always want to government for work? And so I say these things to say that our people need to sit back and stop partying, stop buying all of these brand name clothes and going and run after women and these things. Sacrifice yourself, create a business and become a businessman so that your generation can come up in some sort of comfort. We need to go down that road now. So I thank you for listening to my voice note and I thank you for playing my voice note.
Brother, your business still small. Congratulations on the growth of your business, but it's small. They got people making $300 million in profit daily in this country. All right? And my laughter is not laughing at yours, so. Right? I'm just laughing at the fact that it depends on where you start. You see growth as at different levels. Right? You're still, in my mind, micro or medium scale. Not quite frankly, I don't know what you're involved in, so that too will have a lot to do with where we classify that business. It might be big in the sector that you're operating in. But $1 million, $5,000 a day in profit is. Did you say they are a month? I don't know. I think I heard a month perhaps. But they got businesses that making money in a day and so. Right? But congratulations, and I certainly agree with you. And that is why I said everybody goes to high school and aspire to graduate. Everybody graduates with the same subjects. What makes you different? Right? It's taking that education which you achieved in the formal education system and moving it to a higher level. Right? Somebody is saying that they saw a handful of people assembling at Square of the Revolution. Is the protest that is intended to get Blinkin's attention going to be at the Square of the Revolution? Is the Square of the Revolution along the route that Blinkin would be using to come into the capital city? Is Blinkin coming to the capital city by a convoy, motor vehicle convoy? Or is Air Force One of the Guyana Defense Force going to fly Blinkin into the city? I don't know all these things. I just like to be, like I say ever so often, the devil's advocate. I like to think outside of the box. I always say when it comes to protests, Guyana got one way in, one way out. To get from the Timeri International Airport, not where I understand, that is the largest airport. That is the only airport that the aircraft that will bring Blinkin is likely to be able to land at in terms of security clearance and all of that. And so there's one route from the airport to Georgetown along the East Bank Highway. That's where the protest should be. Timeri Airport in that vicinity, along the East Bank, that's where the protest should be. That should be ground zero for protesting. Kofi suggested in the presence in the vicinity of the U.S. Embassy. Very well, yes. But I am going to hazard a guess that as of last night, nothing could get within a block of the U.S. Embassy. I'm just hazarding that guess. I haven't gone out there. But I'm hazarding that guess, knowing Guyana government and knowing the Guyana police force and so on. For all you know, the embassy might be closed for the day because of how security is tight in that area right now. But I'm saying, even if we were to get the opportunity to sit with Blinken and have breakfast, tea breakfast, and then, as we say, and whisper in his ears for the rest of the year, unless citizens are prepared to take the stance that citizens ought to take, nothing will change. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Sometimes you see a dummy convoy moving along the East Bank and Blinken is comfortably in the U.S. Embassy hours ahead. Come on. It's 9:15. I don't know if it is fate. I left the phone to be charged last night. I didn't look back at it. Apparently, the charger was disconnected. The phone wasn't charged, so it shut down on me just now. But I'm going to play the voice notes that I can access from the computer. Right? No hard feelings. Yeah, don't vex with me. I hope you're enjoying these discussions. Tomorrow is Free Talk Friday. I'll ensure the phone is properly charged and...
Hi, good morning, Kadaki. I'm absolutely sure that the Secretary of State has an advanced team already in Guyana. They may very well know about the impending protests. So, Blinkins may very well be helicoptered into Georgetown rather than driving into Georgetown.
Morning. Today's the day supposed to be a big protest. Let us send all the police them with the tear gas and rubber bullet. Maybe see if they're going to shoot them down today with tear gas and rubber bullet. It's today the streets supposed to line off. Line off where Mr. Blinkin or Blanket or Blanket or wherever he name pass it. Line off and protest. Let us send out a riot squad and let lazy out of the shoot down Guyanese for protesting.
Good morning, Kadaki. Why are Guyanese so dense about the importance of protesting? Can they see and understand the importance of protesting? Protesting is sending a message about how we, the people, feel about our government and the atrocities that we experience. It's a powerful message. Stop attempting to determine what the purpose is of Blinken going to Guyana, but determine your message to him, which goes back to President Biden about how you feel about what's happening in Guyana. And it's simple as that.
It's simple as that. At 16 minutes past the 9 o'clock hour, I can't access any out of voice notes. I'm sorry for that. But we'll talk tomorrow. Join Dr. Hines tonight for another program of Politics 101. And certainly I'll be here tomorrow morning for us to have another program of Guyanese Morning Time with the Buxtonian. Right? Tomorrow we'll have... I am thinking tomorrow I might just open up the lines and let you people share with me and I'll respond accordingly. As against me coming and presenting my thesis or theses and then time goes and you don't get to respond. Right? Is that fair? I think that's fair. Tomorrow we'll talk about more stuff. But things are not always what they seem. Things are not always what they seem. If you want change, you have to be prepared to struggle for it. And you can't always rely on somebody to struggle for you. Right? Right? You can't always have somebody struggle for you or depend on somebody to struggle for you. People are usually willing to join your fight when they recognize you're fighting. But nobody's starting a fight for you. Let me just say, you go to a disco with a friend and somebody disrespects you. Is it likely that your friend will start that fight? Or your friend will back you up when you start the fight? Right? For me, I ain't starting no fight for nobody. No friend. I'll back them up in the fight. We have to start our own fights. We can't wait for Blinken or anybody to start our fights. But like I said, go on, y'all have a good day.